This looks like one of the most innocuous moments in modern cricket. Keshav Maharaj is bowling around the wicket to Kyle Mayers in what is clearly going to be a huge win for South Africa no matter what. Paul Rifle, the umpire, gives it not out. South Africa refer. And even though Myers comes down the wicket, it's clear that this would have gone on and hit the stumps, and so it is overturned thanks to Hawkeye. And so Maharaj celebrates until he doesn't. Because this is the moment that Keshav Maharaj ruptured his Achilles heel. And if you missed it when it happened, that's also because it's not something that usually looks that massive. This is Kevin Durant in the NBA playoffs. You can see that almost nothing happens here at all. He dribbles one way, he stops, he's about to come back in another direction, and then something goes wrong. His foot stops working. This happened in June of 2019. His next basketball game was December 2020. Some of the delay was COVID related. But Achilles injuries are horrific. That essentially means a tear of the tendon connecting the calf and the heel. If you just shivered, you're right to do so. For a short time, the pain can be agonizing, but the problem is that they last a long time. These kinds of injuries generally come from high intensity changes of directions or jumping. Also, tennis and football is another sport we see them a lot. We don't get as many in cricket for kind of obvious reasons. And it isn't that cricket's never had any Achilles injuries. Matt Pry's career was cut short by his Achilles when he couldn't even get to the hotel toilet to take a whiz in the middle of the night. Josh Hazlewood has an Achilles injury at the moment that has ruled him out of the current series against India. And Kevin Peterson was also someone who hurt his Achilles and had to have an operation. But these weren't ruptured. I did find a couple that were. Queensland keeper Georgie Redmayne is currently rehabbing from a ruptured Achilles. She has a huge advantage over other cricketers in this regard though, as she is also a doctor. But there's a couple more relevant ones when we look at Keshav Maharaj directly. JP Duminy was very much a part-time spinner, but he certainly bowled. And in 2012, he ruptured his Achilles at the Gabba in a post-play warm-up. He wasn't even on the field that day. This is why they were taking him out to get some exercise and running through some drills. That was on the 9th of November, and Duminy's next match was the 31st of May. Luckily for him, he bowled 5 overs of off-spin in that game against the Netherlands, and then he continued to bowl in the champion trophy for South Africa. His bowling didn't really change all that much at all. The second player I found was Liam Dawson, a cricketer who has been more on the fringes of England than Duminy has been for South Africa, but he's a left-arm orthodox who bats a bit. He ruptured his taking off for a single. He heard the pop. He actually thought he had stepped on the stumps at the time. That was in August of 2020. He didn't play again until April of 2021. Now, the end of the England summer and COVID played a part in his on layoff, but he usually did play in T20 tournaments in the off-season. Now, Dawson bowls even more than Duminy. If Duminy was more of a proper part-timer, then Dawson is more of a solid fifth option with the ball. Either way, both players took around 7 to 8 months to come back. We are currently 7 months from the start of the World Cup. And there are some good signs for Maharaj. He injured the right foot. And by that I mean he injured his left foot. For a finger spinner, the front foot is the one that would stress them a lot more as they rotate on that as they land, and it's quite often half in the air. All these things involve the Achilles, I think. The fact that he has injured his left foot, his back foot, might actually help him. Dawson and Duminy both actually injured their front foot, and they still came back in 7 and 8 months' time. There have been other athletes in other sports who've recovered even quicker from this injury, sometimes coming back in as little as 4 or 4.5 months. However, the big difference is that, of course, Maharaj bowls a lot more than Duminy or Dawson. He is a frontline spinner, and he bowls a lot of overs compared to them and compared to, like, anyone. Part of the reason for that is currently the face of South African spin. As their wickets have helped to change the tweakers a lot more, he's become an automatic selection in their test side. And not as a novelty like Paul Adams or an experiment like Imran Tahir, not even just to bowl the dog overs like they made Paul Harris do. Maharaj is a genuine frontline bowler who is on his way to becoming the highest wicket-taking spinner in the history of South African Test cricket. Only the great Hugh Tayfield has him covered at the moment. And it's a fairly unlikely record for a player who made his professional debut in 2006, but it took him 10 years to actually make it to the top of international cricket. Looking at his record, it doesn't make that much sense. Maharaj was doing very well pretty much from the time he made his debut. By 2012, he certainly looked like an international level bowler. You could see that his first class average each year at home was really solid, and on occasion, incredibly low. But of course, a lot of this is in the lower division of first class cricket. For the Dolphins, he still maintained a sub 30 average from 2012 until 2016, but they didn't actually let him play full seasons for a long time. Because if you're a spinner in South Africa, it doesn't actually matter how good you are, you still might not get opportunities. And that's probably what held him back. In fact, from 2012 to 2016, South Africa were in their Imran Tahir acid phase. At that stage, Maharaj would have been a good option, but he basically had to wait for Tahir to be moved on for him to get his own chance. So Maharaj starts playing at the end of 2016, but 2017 was his first full season. And in that, he took the 7th most wickets in Test cricket. So at the end of 2016, he played a few games, but it was 2017 was the first time he played a full year of Test cricket. And he only went on to take the 7th most wickets. He's just under Ravi Jadeja and Rangana Herath. Two pretty good left-arm spinners, I think you'll say. And Maharaj averaged 23 that year as well. Since his debut, he has the 12th most wickets in all tests. This is not a normal thing for a South African spinner to do. The fact that he's also done it while averaging 32, which is very good for a spinner who spends so much time bowling in South Africa, just shows how important he has been to this team. He's really been like a left-arm version of Nathan Lyon for them, giving South Africa proper overs and taking enough wickets to stay a constant threat. He hasn't been as good in ODI cricket, and partly that's because South Africa just haven't been sure if they've wanted him or to praise Shamsi. At times, both of them have been in the 11, but in the last 3 years, Maharaj has been the better of the two by a distance in one-day cricket. Their averages are almost identical, but Maharaj goes at a run and over less when you look at their economy rates. So you would think he would be the automatic spinner going ahead, especially as the next World Cup is being played on Indian pitches where finger spin is fairly important. If Maharaj isn't fit, that's a huge problem for South Africa. You can also throw in his batting, which isn't really a plus on that end, but he's also not a total zero, which allows them to continue with their bonkers plan of never picking a number 7 who can bat. Keshav Maharaj is a really important player for South Africa to lose coming into a World Cup in India. They are currently around 9-1 to win that World Cup. And weirdly enough, his injury hasn't changed their odds. And I can get why. Maharaj is not a big name and the injury hasn't made huge news yet. But if you're going to the World Cup and you've just found out that your spinner is at best a 50% chance of playing, that should change the odds. Obviously for Maharaj, missing that main tournament would be a drag. But I think perhaps the bigger issue is how his future goes from here. It took him a decade to break into the national team. And in tests, he's contending with Simon Harmer, who's a fantastic spinner. And in the white ball cricket, it's Shamsi, who at various times has been the #1 ranked T20 bowler in the world. Probably because of the change of conditions and also just a bit of a freaky golden era, suddenly South Africa have spinners everywhere. And the truth is that not all athletes recover well from ruptured Achilles. It takes away your athleticism, which of course matters more for someone like Kevin Durant than it does for Keshav Maharaj. But for a 33-year-old spinner who's going to be closer to 34 the next time he actually plays a game, it could have a big impact on his career. And I think that would be a shame because Maharaj forced his way into a culture that didn't trust spin and has been so good that he's on his way to becoming the highest ever wicket taker in tests. He's a player who clearly gives his all across all 3 disciplines, is incredibly professional and tries very hard. He deserves a chance at a World Cup and he certainly deserves better than this.